What is up, guys? It is the Blue Bloods here, back with a SWAC Week 6 recap. And man, we got a lot to talk about. Sorry about being a little bit late on this episode. They still will usually drop 8 a.m. on Mondays, but we had a 12-hour drive back up from Huntsville this weekend, so kind of got delayed on recording, prep, and everything. And so we probably won't go as in depth on some of the other games. I got to watch a few highlights of the Texas Southern game over Southern, so we'll talk about that and briefly talk about some of the other games and kind of what I saw in the brief time that I got to, watch some videos on the way home and everything like that. But you already know where we got to start, man. It has to start with Jackson State's dominant, absolutely dominant win over Alabama A&M, 61-15 in Huntsville this weekend. And if you could write a perfect script, like if I gave you, if you asked me to say, if Jackson State wins, this, and this would happen, I would just take the screenshot of exactly what happened on Saturday, and that would be the exact storyline you would have to go with. I mean, Jackson State dominated every single aspect of this game, and it was never even close from James Houston's fumble return until Shador is doing his dad's dance in the end zone. It was never even close. They got the scoreboard operator to put up 61 points on that Lewis Cruz scoreboard, and they cleared out each section of the Alabama A&M fans one by one in those second half touchdowns, man. And I want to say this, we were down there. I had an absolute blast in Huntsville, man. We got to meet some Jackson State fans. Shout out to y'all. Got to meet some Alabama A&M fans. Everyone who I got to meet and chat with this weekend, shout out to y'all. Y'all are great. The players' families and families and friends we got to talk to, man. Shout out to y'all. Glad that y'all are rocking with our show, regardless of who you root for. And also, I want to say this because me and all script to some of the newer people, we had that conversation about the bands and everything, and I told y'all I didn't really understand it. I got it now. The Sonic Boom of the South's legit. I thought it was a great performance. I know some Alabama A&M fans probably going to downplay it, but the Jackson State fans, the band, I mean, it was so the band was so loud at one point, I believe in the third quarter, that one of the families sitting beside us was like, what are they ever going to stop playing? Are the bands ever going to stop playing? How are the bands so loud? I mean, that's how much of an impact just the Sonic Boom had on the road. And the Jackson State fans, it looked like a party on that side of the field, and they showed up. They packed out their side. And so everyone who commented that they were bringing 10, 15,000, it was legit. And so I had a blast, man. Shout out to everyone. And we're going to try to make it down to the Jackson State Alcorn game. So if you didn't get to see us this weekend, you could probably catch us that weekend. And it was a great weekend. But let's get to the game. And I want to start with the offense of Jackson State because TC Taylor needs an MVP award for finally putting these guys in positions to make plays. And we finally saw what this offense was going to be in the preseason. You look at Jackson State, they averaged over 9 yards per play. They had almost 500 yards of total offense. Shador Sanders threw for 254 touchdowns, and he made some just absolute impressive throws. The one to Javante Rucker in the corner, and I mean, there were a few downfield passes where he put it on the money and really put his wide receivers in a spot to succeed. He threw for 254 touchdowns, had 58 yards rushing with a touchdown, over 9 yards per carry, and I was impressed with his mobility. The delayed QB draw that they ran in the second half was executed perfectly, and I don't think there was an Alabama A&M defender within probably 10 yards of them the entire play. I don't know how they designed it up and schemed it up, but the Alabama A&M defense was not ready for that. So I was extremely impressed with Shador this weekend. Everybody on the wide receiving core ate this weekend. 4 different receivers got touchdown passes and 6 different receivers caught a pass. Newman led them, of course, 5 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. And finally, even though I picked A&M, I was so happy to see that Malachi Wadman was used in the red zone. I said that week 1 against FAMU that Wadman and Rutgers should be the red zone targets. They finally used Wadman in the back corner of the end zone, and he got so much separation that it wasn't even close, and it was just pretty much a walk-in touchdown. So I'm very excited to see Wadman getting some opportunities because for me, I really think he has the highest ceiling of any wide receiver in that wide receiving room for Jackson State. Now, the rushing attack. They put up 250, 4 touchdowns, and averaged about 8.5, a little bit over 8.5 yards per touch this weekend. And we finally saw the running back change that, a lot of us were clamoring for. I know, especially Jackson State fans, they were like, we got to get away from Peyton Pickett. He did not see a carry this weekend. We saw the emergence of Santee Marshall again. JD Martin got some work as the number 2 running back, and they put on an absolute show. 122, 2 touchdowns, over 10 yards per carry for Marshall. Martin had 44 yards rushing and a touchdown. It was a clinic this weekend by Jackson State on how to be balanced. They controlled the line of scrimmage. They kept the defense guessing, and they just executed at such a high level. And I was very impressed. And what it did too, and this is something that a lot of these channels, I mean, everyone's kind of caught up on, talking about who picked who and all that. I just want to talk about the game, man, because once you saw Jackson State be balanced in their play calling change, look at what they did on third down and in the red zone. 5 for 5 in the red zone. That's an area where Jackson State really struggled to, get the ball in the end zone. Every time they got in the end zone, they had some great plays. You saw the lotto play where they brought them across, put them in the slot, and let them run to the back corner of the end zone. And A&M didn't move. I might do a film breakdown on some of the things I saw from the defense because it was atrocious. But on top of that, you saw the Wadman catch. You saw how they were able to run the ball. For me, the balance of this offense that we saw this weekend really solved a lot of the issues I had with Jackson State. Red zone, 5 for 5. Third downs, they only were getting about 30% of their third downs coming into this game. They were 8 for 10 this weekend. And they took the situations where they struggled, where I personally thought A&M could maybe take advantage, and they dominated those situations. And that really was the difference in this game. And the only concern I have as a team this weekend was the penalties for Jackson State. 16 for almost 150 yards. I mean, I think all combined with the emotion of the game and being a road environment, this just won't be as big of a problem moving forward. But that's the only thing I could even say had to be cleaned up. The defensive linemen were jumping the snap count, so they got caught in the neutral zone a lot. But for A&M, the thing I had to wonder is why weren't they changing up their snap count? If Houston, Miller, all those D linemen were trying to jump, why wouldn't you go with the delayed snap count or do something to keep them off balance where you don't give them the advantage? They already had the advantage coming in, and then you give them an even further advantage by letting them figure out your snap count. That was a bad, lack of adjustments by A&M. And then also, you have to give the offensive line credit. I know they had the advantage, and I said that they had the advantage in this matchup, but I said they had to win this, and they absolutely embarrassed the front 7 for Alabama A&M. 0 sacks allowed, only 2 tackles for loss. And there's some clips. I didn't have time to cut them up just because we were traveling, but go watch Cut Day's condensed game. There were some clips of like Tony Gray one-arming a defensive end and one-arming him into the ground and treating him like his child. It was so impressive of how they finally played physical. And I said on the preview that they have all the talent, that this shouldn't be a concern for Jackson State. And they finally showed the physicality and that demeanor of a good offensive line, that we're going to, whoop you on the line of scrimmage and we are better than you. And they finally showed that after 6 frustrating weeks of not doing that. They finally came to play, and the offensive line for me was the key, because you had some times where Shedeur was back in the pocket, and let's say Alabama A&M played some good, secondary defense. Shedeur had, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds in the pocket, man, and he could just run around and sit in the pocket, and then he could either make plays with his leg or eventually one of those wide receivers would find their way open. The offensive line played outstanding for Jackson State. Now, the defense. A clinic on front 7 play. Listen, I was an offensive lineman, but for me, I want to try to get a film breakdown done of this front 7, because they wreaked havoc this weekend. And it was kicked off with the 60-yard fumble return, and then on top of that, 10 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, and only allowing 8 rushing yards for Gary Quarles in that Alabama A&M rushing attack, which led the SWAC in rushing coming into this game. The defense, they came in against Alabama A&M, one of the most explosive offenses in the SWAC. They held them to 4.2 yards per play. And that's one of the most explosive offenses in the SWAC. They put on a clinic. And for me, Jackson State, Coach Prime, all the assistants and and TC Taylor and Thurman, they deserve all the credit in the world. And I came away so impressed. I know some people are mad that I picked against Jackson State. Everything. I'm conceding that this was the most impressive performance in the SWAC this year by far. And when I'm looking at it down the stretch, I mean, is there a team that y'all can say wants to see this team on the field executing at such a high level? They came in with the biggest chip on their shoulder, and they showed you what could happen if they play good football, and they executed a high level like they're supposed to. And I came away, even I was in the stands, and I was leaving the game, and I was looking at my co-host Brandon, and I was like, man, that was an that was a beat down. That's a team right now in Jackson State. And I talked to Scotty off script. I talked to Mr. Gaddy about it. That's a team that I think could win a first round playoff game in the FCS playoffs. And for me, I'm recording this right now on Monday morning, so the rankings haven't came out yet. I think Jackson State's going to be in the top 20, right around there. I think this is a team, and I told Scotty this too, that this is a team that I think could beat any team in that like 15 to 25 range right now in the country. I mean, I want to see more before I say they're going to beat a North Dakota State or something, but this is a top 20 team in my opinion right now in the country if they play like they did this weekend. And I'll admit when I'm wrong, and I was wrong coming into this one, and I was so impressed with Jackson State. And they made every doubter in the country that may have been like, man, I don't know if they can do it. Well, I don't think there's a question now because they put on an absolute show. And for Alabama A&M, man, and I was having a conversation with people this weekend. Where do you go from here? This was supposed to be the Super Bowl. This was homecoming. This was Maynard's chance to put on a show. Ric Flair did the coin toss. Everything was set up for you to make a statement or at least make it competitive. Because my preview, I didn't think it was going to be a blowout either way because I thought these teams matched up very well. And it was an absolute beatdown in your home stadium on homecoming. And you just got whooped on both sides of the ball. You couldn't protect a quill. The defense couldn't stop anything. The special teams were average, and there was just no energy down the stretch. And you're looking ahead, and things could get so out of hand if you don't turn this around quickly. What's the energy going to be like? What's the Houston going to be like against you next weekend? That's the type of questions I have about A&M right now. And for me, this weekend was the weekend Jackson State, Shador Sanders, and Coach Prime said, all those kids we brought in, all the work we did on the offseason, this is where it pays off. And Jackson State, dominant 61-15 win. And all I have to do, I saw, Coach Prime was bowing down to Ric Flair after the coin toss. You just got to bow down, give all the flowers to this Jackson State team because I don't want to hear, and listen, I'll call the people out. I don't want to hear anybody say Alabama A&M was overrated. I don't want to hear anything like that because Jackson State deserves the credit this weekend. Don't do anything to downplay Jackson State's win this weekend. It was impressive, the most impressive win in the SWAC this year, in my opinion. That was the most dominant performance, and I think you'll see that reflected in the polls. And that's coming from someone who covers FCS football and has been hard on the SWAC in terms of that. Jackson State is a legit contender right now. And we won't get to the debate. I wish I could see Jackson State play a Sam Houston State, man, because I think y'all and I think everyone in the SWAC would be shocked at how competitive it would be. But we'll digress and let's get to the other huge game. Texas Southern shocked Southern in a 35-31 upset. In this game, man, I was so impressed. I got to watch a little bit of this game. I went back and found some highlights and everything because when I saw the score leaving the Alabama A&M game, I was like, wait, what? And as y'all know, my co-host Brandon lives in Baton Rouge. He's a big Southern guy, and so he was very upset. It was his birthday Saturday, so not only did he get to see Alabama A&M lose, he got to see Southern lose, and he got to see LSU lose. So it was not a good weekend for our guy Brandon. But man, I want to start with Andrew Bodie at quarterback. Man, 338 yards. 0 turnovers again, had 85 yards on the ground. And even though he didn't have any touchdowns, man, he went out there and made play after play and led Texas Southern to almost 600 yards of total offense against Southern. And He did it. I mean, he was so efficient through the air, 28 of 35, averaging almost 10 yards per attempt. This kid's not dinking and dunking. He's pushing it down the field, and he's leading a very efficient Texas Southern offense. And everyone coming into the game was like, they played North American University just a few weeks ago and won 69 to nothing. They've been right on the cusp of almost breaking through. And for me, this win couldn't have meant more to this program, especially being, the perceived doormat of the SWAC. And now they get a win over Southern, who was supposed to be a contender for the SWAC West. And now you're looking like, damn, man. Well, is it a Prairie View Alcorn race right now? Or is Texas Southern legit? Or is Southern just overrated? And I don't want to hear anything about, well, Southern did what they do. They ran for over 300 yards, over 6 yards per carry. They had 2 turnovers, but so did Texas Southern. They dominated the time of possession. If I would have told y'all coming in that Southern would rush for 300, win the time of possession by over 10 minutes, and on top of that, put up 530 yards of total offense, you'd be like, well, damn, Southern ran away with this one. But they had no answer, man. And the thing about Bodie and this Texas Southern offense is they didn't run away with this game. They had to put a last minute drive together to score to win this game, and they found a way to do so. So what they're getting is meaningful game experience in clutch situations, and they're delivering already. They don't have a lot of experience with it all now, but they're winning while they're gaining experience, which means they can be a very dangerous team moving forward. And if you don't have a defense that can put them on ice and extend the game, if you let them hang around, Texas Southern's becoming a team that's going to be very dangerous moving forward. And so now you're looking like, man, could Texas Southern, finish third, fourth in that division? McDaniel played decent, but he didn't have a touchdown. He wasn't very explosive, 200 yards a pick. But on top of that, is showing that Southern's going to have to pass the ball. When you have Bodie over there throwing for 300 yards on you, you're going to have to be a bit more balanced if you're Southern. And so now you're looking at that defense like, man, you still got to play a Jackson State offense. You still got to play an Alcorn. You still got some really tough games if you're Southern. And this was a game I think every SWAC expert in the country marked as a W before the season. And now you're sitting at 2-3, and you've got a lot of SWAC play ahead of you. And you're like, damn, you already got a loss to Texas Southern. And all it's going to do is put more pressure on Southern to execute down the stretch. And they have an extremely tough schedule moving forward. So now you're looking like, man, what changes are you going to make so you can compete for this SWAC championship? It's a big ask right now for Southern. I think there's a big question mark surrounding this team, and you got to give Ben and Dylan and McLean, those running backs, some props. They put on a show. Ben had 151 and a touchdown, but on the flip side, Texas Southern had 238 on the ground and 5 touchdowns, man. So Southern's defense has a problem because you saw Mississippi Valley State put up some solid yardage on them. So for me, it's really just kind of looking at how are you going to respond to this, Southern? This is a gut check for Southern because it's what do you do moving forward now to kind of rebound? Because this is one of those losses like you see, in the Power Five with Bama over A&M, Oregon with Stanford. How do you respond to getting your bell rung by a team that you didn't think was even going to be in the fight with you? So this is a gut check time for Southern. I know a lot of people were wondering if that was the correct head coaching hire. A loss to Texas Southern only amplifies that. And I'm new to the SWAC, so I'm not going to speak on that. So I want any Southern fans tuned in, please comment below on what you think about the loss, what that means for job security and things like that, because I am new and, I'm not as tuned into all the coaching changes and stuff as some of the other, YouTubers and insiders and things like that. But moving on, just some other SWAC games that I really didn't get a chance to catch, and I just kind of wanted to briefly talk about them. Alcorn State gets a huge SWAC West win over Grambling 24-20. I thought this was going to be a very close game. It was. I thought Grambling maybe could pull it out, but you look at Alcorn, they're winning. It might not be always pretty for Alcorn, but they're winning. And so for me, it's looking as, is it going to be just an Alcorn Prairie View race out in the West now that Southern's fallen to teams like Texas Southern? And it's just like so many other YouTubers have said, and the SWAC is so competitive this year. So if Alcorn just keeps getting these ugly wins down the down the stretch, we eventually just have to say, man, great job just winning, because we've seen the scrambling team smack Alabama A&M. They're very competitive, and so for me, this was a big win for Alcorn because Grambling's looking really, really good, and you've got to give Grambling's defense some credit. If Grambling had any sort of offensive production, man, they would be so good. So for me, if Noah Baldwin keeps improving and keeps evolving, Grambling is going to be something serious in these upcoming seasons. Now, Alabama State rebounds against Arkansas Pine Bluff 35-15. Miles Crawley had a huge game, 292, 4 touchdowns. But you're looking at Doc Gamble and you're wondering, and did that SWAC championship appearance maybe save his job? Because what if they don't get that last year? And now you're sitting here, you've got a loss to Alcorn, you've got a loss to Prairie, you've got a loss to Alabama State. Alabama State put up 35 on you after FAMU absolutely embarrassed that offense. So now you're looking like, man, what is Arkansas Pine Bluff going to do? They were supposedly, everyone was, I'll admit myself into that. Everyone was like, man, they were so disrespected getting voted fifth with 11 all SWAC selections. Well, it's looking like that was a proper thing, and that it looks like they were one of the teams that really benefited from the spring season and it being shortened and other teams not being ready. Alabama State has looked atrocious at times this year, but they get another huge win. And now you're looking at Donald Ely like, man, what is the hot seat situation there? He was on the hot seat after Auburn. He was off of it after a big win in Bethune. He gets back on it after a win at FAMU. And now is he back off of it after a win at Arkansas Pine Bluff? I think this upcoming weekend is going to determine a lot for Ely and his job security. The rushing game just hasn't really been the same for Alabama State. Ezra Gray had, I believe, 50 rushing yards this weekend. They're going to have to find a way to establish the line of scrimmage like they did last year. But right now, you're looking at Alabama State like they're going to beat the teams they're supposed to beat, but they're really right now just a middle of the road team, and they just need that spark because I think their defense is very good. They just need that offensive spark to kind of take them over the top. So I'm looking at Alabama State and Grambling as two teams that they can get some offensive help come in. They could be serious contenders in the SWAC, but right now they're probably going to be middle of the pack just because of those offensive, they're limited on the offensive side of the ball. Mississippi Valley gets their first SWAC win of the year over Bethune, 20-14, and boy, is Sims on the hot seat down there in Bethune. I said on the roundtable I had Valley winning this game, and I think Bethune. We had it on our mailbag last week. They got to make a coaching change. Maybe they go the celebrity coaching route, maybe they don't. But for me, they came in with such high expectations, and now you're sitting at 0-6, and you're looking around like, man, what do we do here? We still got some really tough games on the schedule. And they can't go winless. And you're looking at FAMU, and yes, the history suggests they're going to be competitive, but for I to see super competitive with FAMU this year. So you're like, where do they get that win? They get beat by Alabama State, who FAMU absolutely demolished. They get beat by Valley. Who does Bethune beat this year? That's the question that's coming down the pipeline. Big win for Valley, though. That team looks better and better. I talked to some people this weekend about Valley, and they said that that's one of the more impressive, turnarounds, and that, the offensive revolution that they have going down there is legit. And as they add a bit more talent moving forward, Mississippi Valley could be a serious problem. But great win for Valley this weekend over Bethune. And then finally, Florida A&M stays hot against their former MEAC rival, South Carolina State, a 30-7 win. And there's a conversation brewing now. I know Mr. Campbell's probably against it. I know, but Mr. Dwayne, who's always watching our show, man, FAMU looks legit. And now you're starting to look at this wondering, man, what would happen if that Jackson State FAMU game wasn't week 1? What happens if that game's this week or, a week ago or, somewhere in that 5 to 9 range in terms of which week that game happened? You'd be looking at it much more intently. And I think it could be even a bigger game as FAMU's evolved their game throughout the season and as Jackson State also has gotten better. So for me, I think that game being week 1 really hurt both of those teams, and that we could have a Goliath matchup if that game was later in the season. But now there's a conversation brewing among SWAC fans about, is FAMU playoff worthy? Should they take that chance and go play in the playoffs this year? Try to see if they can get an at-large bid or something like that. Now, everyone has a different opinion on it, and we're not getting into that debate. But FAMU, if Jackson State doesn't lose down the stretch, which right now I don't know if that's the case, if Jackson State can't lose twice down the stretch, Does FAMU give themselves something to play for by trying to get in that first round of the playoffs? Trying to go make a statement, because I think that defense is good enough to make some noise. But let's see what they do. This is a team that I'm watching very closely because they've been getting better week after week after week. And right now, I think personally the Rattlers might be the second best team in the SWAC. I think it's Jackson State, Prairie View, and Florida A&M right now in terms of the three best teams in the SWAC. But man, Florida A&M, man, is playing really good football right now. We're going to find out a lot about them next week. So let's move on here. Let's wrap this episode up, man. Final takeaways. One, Jackson State's put the SWAC on notice. And right now, if they play like they did this weekend on the field, I don't think there's any team in the SWAC that wants to see them on the field like that. Two, Texas Southern, Andrew Bodie have become something to watch over these next few weeks in the SWAC. And in the future, if they can bring some talent in to play with him, I think we're going to see an uptick in Texas Southern's recruiting. Three, Prairie View, Alcorn. What a race in the SWAC West. That's going to be something to watch down the stretch, and I cannot wait to see that game happen. And I think that's a game that, if I have a chance, I might try to go down and see, because I'm so excited to see Harper versus Pass and that Prairie View defense against that wide receiving core over at Alcorn. That's going to be a game to watch. And then finally is FAMU, a dark horse, a sleeping giant in the SWAC. And if they didn't lose that Jackson State game, man, what could the conversation be for them? And should they go to the playoffs? Those are my takeaways, man. A quick Week 7 preview. We got some huge games this next weekend. Prairie View versus Bethune-Cookman. That could be a real test to see if Sims gets to keep his job. And also, it could be another big win for Prairie View to continue their SWAC dominance this season. Florida A&M, Alabama A&M. We will be previewing that game on this channel. That's probably might be our game of the week. I haven't picked one yet, but we'll definitely be previewing that game. That's going to be a huge one. Can Maynard and that Alabama A&M offense rebound, and/or can FAMU really establish themselves as the best team, the second best team in the SWAC East, right behind Jackson State? Alabama State, Jackson State, a revenge game. Jackson State is going to be looking to prove everybody that Alabama State had a fluke win last year. Alabama State brings in this revamped offense after they fired their offensive coordinator. Are they going to be able to run the ball like they did last year against Jackson State? We will also be previewing that game on this channel. Southern, Arkansas Pine Bluff, going to be a very interesting game. Can Southern rebound? Can Arkansas Pine Bluff, bounce back from a very tough start to their SWAC season? Texas Southern, Grambling, going to be a very interesting game. This is going to really kind of determine what the ceiling is for Texas Southern, and if Grambling is just going to be one of those middle of the road teams, and or if what is exactly are these two teams going to be, because they're kind of the two dark horses right now in that SWAC West. Alcorn, Mississippi Valley State. Can Mississippi Valley State pull off the upset of the season, man, for them? Can Keaton Evans and that offense score on Alcorn, put pressure on Felix Harper? Those games are going to the SWAC is going to be determined over these next few weeks, and really the contenders and pretenders are going to be separated. We saw it this weekend. Man, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Sorry again about being late, man. That 12-hour drive killed me, and I didn't have time last night to do all the prep I usually do. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, man. We got all the SWAC content right here on the Bluebloods. Shout out to everyone again who I got to talk to this weekend. I can't wait to get down there for more games. And it was a blast this weekend. Big statement by Jackson State and Texas Southern getting the huge upset. The SWAC is starting to get real interesting, guys. And we'll have all the SWAC content right here on the Bluebloods. Appreciate y'all supporting so much, man. I can't thank y'all enough for all the love we got again. But for right now, man, we'll be back with our tomorrow night live. Make sure to go to our community page, submit your questions. It can be SWAC, it could be Power 5, FCS, it does not matter. Just submit your questions and we'll address them live. So tune in 6:30 p.m. Central Time Tuesday night. But guys, for right now, the Bluebloods are